At this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
I will never forget the image during the ambush at the bridge. We're on top of the bridge. We're trying to deal with the craziness. The bombs are falling. But I looked over my shoulder and you were laying on the top of a Humvee, engaging targets off in the distance. Wild times, right?
It really was, and sometimes I've, in previous conversations, if it wasn't for the kind of the scars and the pictures, not to sound dramatic, like it almost seems like a dream. My counselor asked me a question. He said, "Hey, if you were to die tomorrow, what would it say on your tombstone?" And it set me back. He goes, "Well, sniper, recon, all the kind of t-shirts, right? All the things that we kind of hang, Marine Corps, hang our hat on." And I was like, "Yeah, I would say all those things." And he goes, "Okay, well, what else could it say? You're not even halfway done yet. Those are things that you did. Those were jobs that you, performed at, but they're not who you are." And it just hit me like a bolt of lightning. This machine is never going to love me the way I love it.
Hello and welcome to the March or Die Show. Glad to have you joining us today. This is the show where we do our best. Sometimes I hit the mark and sometimes I don't, but we do our best to give you both the principles and perspectives you need to march when it would be easier to stay where you are and die. And I appreciate you joining us today. If you're not yet subscribed, please do that now, wherever you're listening from. If you're not on the YouTube channel, go over to YouTube when this is over. If you're listening, go to YouTube, subscribe there. A lot of great content there, and I'd encourage you to join us there. A lot of other things happening, and I don't want to get into any of those today because I want to jump right into our conversation. Today is a really, for me, very special podcast episode. I like all of our episodes, but this one is special to me. I've got a friend and a brother from years ago. And it's one of those relationships, I'll talk about it a little bit. One of those relationships, we haven't stayed close over the years. We've connected here and there and communicated a little bit. But I have a small circle of people that I look to and go, when the world was burning down around me, they were there. And my guest today is one of those. Dagan Van Oosten is with me. Man, how you doing? It's great to have you on.
Brother, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So a little of your background, Marine, sniper, that's how we met. I'll talk about that here in just a second. But then, we came back from Iraq. I got out of the Marine Corps and you went on and did great things. You've done just about everything you can with a rifle, I think. You contracted, instructor, worked for the CIA for a while. You've done all kinds of stuff, and I'll let you talk about that if you'd like to. But in the process of that, built a family, raising kids, doing all the things. And it's just not easy to do that. And man, I've watched you from kind of a distance over the years and just super proud to know you and proud of what you built. And then you co-founder of a company that's producing a great product, Nomadic Research, producing gear for people like you, right? For guys that have been places and need their gear to matter when it matters. And just continue to build, man. And it's awesome to be able to talk to you. It's funny. So I've told the story like a zillion times. It's the March or Die story. It's that day, April 1st, on the bridge. And we got into a major firefight, a major engagement. And I tell this story all the time, and people are kind, but I don't know if they always believe me. But it was wild, man. And so a little of our background, right? So we deployed to Iraq in, I guess, Kuwait in January 2003, eventually went into Iraq as part of the push. At the time, you were the sniper platoon sergeant, right? That was your role.
Chief Scout.
Chief Scout.
Chief Scout, Staff Sergeant Edward Zapata was the platoon sergeant.
Platoon sergeant, yeah, sorry, yeah. Who had been my platoon sergeant when I was a rifle platoon commander. So we all deployed together. At the time, Staff Sergeant Zapata, who retired as Sergeant Major Zapata, who had a huge influence on my life. When I checked into 1-5 as a second lieutenant, he was my platoon sergeant. And I've credited him over the years with really helping me to understand how to be a Marine and how to lead Marines. And then he went over to Scout Snipers. You were there. So when we all deployed to Iraq, you guys were kind of like the Misfit group, right? Like it had nowhere to fit. And I just happened to lead a platoon of Misfits. And so Staff Sergeant Zapata said, "I've got my team. I want to attach them to you because I know you'll take care of them." And they just fit, right? And so you guys jumped into our vehicles, we pushed, and so many things happened. We got to know each other, you and I did, during that time. But I will never forget the image during the ambush at the bridge. We're on top of the bridge. We're trying to deal with the craziness. The bombs are falling. That's where the march or die thing comes from. People have heard me talk about this a million times. But I looked over my shoulder and you were laying on the top of a Humvee engaging targets off in the distance. And dude, like that's an image I will never forget. And it wasn't the last time I saw that either. But wild times, right?
It really was. And sometimes I've, in previous conversations, if it wasn't for the kind of the scars and the pictures, not to sound dramatic, like it almost seems like a dream,
Yeah.
right? Like so much of it is, and kind of the human memory, and we all kind of know the kind of the pitfalls with the human memory. It's like I need these conversations to continually, hold on to, those kind of fleeting images, and then some that you'll never forget, right?
Yeah, no, that's right. It's funny just knowing that we were going to talk. I've spent a lot of time thinking about kind of those days and the push. And I have these because I speak a lot on this and I've written on this a lot in our time in Iraq, and that I have these moments and the way I tell these stories. But, just thinking of moments where, we're in a security position, you're hanging out at our vehicle and we're just talking about life and talking about stuff. These are memories I haven't dusted off in 20 plus years, right?
Yeah.
But that's why I think the bond between those who've served in a combat environment is so tight, because in those moments where all we had was each other to depend on, man, how many other times in your life are you in environments like that, right?
Right.
Where you look around and you go, if things go bad, and they probably will, and they have, these are the guys I have to lean on.
Yeah, and what a and I'm not saying this because you're sitting here. What a fantastic, when you look back, what a fantastic group of individuals.
Yeah, incredible.
Just from the top down. First Battalion, Fifth Marines during that time frame, it was just an incredible group of individuals. And even at the time, I think we kind of knew that.
Yeah.
And definitely in retrospect, looking back, once again, just great dudes across the board.
Yeah. It was a time that is very special. I had the opportunity to have coffee with General Padilla. He's retired. He was our battalion commander at the time, Lieutenant Colonel Padilla at the time. He lives near me, so we get together once in a while, and it's great. We sit down and talk. And we were talking about this a few weeks ago, that was a moment, and I didn't understand it then. I thought that this is just what it looks like. And we had, General Mattis was our division commander. Joe Dunford, who became the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, was regimental commander. And then our battalion commander, I would still do anything he wanted me to do today, right?
100%.
A leader's leader, compassionate, strong, all the things you would look to for a leader. In Fred Padilla, retired as a 2-star, did amazing things. Third Marine Division CO at one point, amazing things. And then just on down, at every level, it was special. And it's funny, you have to look back to realize that, because I knew it was special, but I thought that this is how it's supposed to be. And then you get a little ways out and you're like, this isn't how it is all the time.
It's not how it is all the time. You're super strong, in my opinion, super strong NCOs, very strong staff NCOs, and the officer corps as well. You know what I mean? And there's going to be I had my fair share of personality conflicts, and things of that nature. But it seemed to, when it was time to do work, it was, it kind of ran like a Swiss watch, or as good as it was going to go.
Another sniper story I've told over the years is we finally made it into Baghdad on April 10th. And that was another, absolutely incredible engagement. Whether it took 7 hours or, 25 hours, I've heard all these different lengths of time. I have no idea. It took a long time. It was dark when we started and it was late afternoon when we finished. I know that for sure. But one of the memories I have, we got up onto a rooftop, and I was, so with what I did, we're setting up machine gun positions in different places. And one of the places we had to set up a machine gun position was on that rooftop. And so I went up there to be with my machine gun team, and you were there with your spotter. And it was a wild time, man. Right out in front of the building where we were, there was a counterattack and there was a lot of things happening, and standing next to you guys while you're clearing targets out in the street. Just, again, these are things you think about. You try to explain it to people and they don't understand, what a unique environment that is.
Yeah, it happened. It seemed to happen so fast,
Yeah.
right? And even though it was like you said, like was it 9 hours? Was it six?
Yeah.
What a
Right.
blur! You know what a blur that kind of that entry, that fight in was. I remember obviously bits and pieces, but yeah, the rooftop got active real quick. You know, and yeah, it was. I would call it a target-rich environment. You know, the guys were obviously ready and eager to prosecute targets and protect the Marines on the ground.
Yeah.
That rooftop was prime real estate for
Yeah,
a
it
lot of
was.
different reasons, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, it was.
it was a good spot.
Yeah. Wild stuff, man. And then, we came back. We were in the city for a couple weeks, and then retrograded back and came home, and I got out and moved on. And you stayed at it. Talk about your career a little bit, kind of beyond that.
So I had, yeah, and I appreciate the question. I had orders to Quantico Sniper School right after the invasion, and kind of the only sticking point there was, 1-5 obviously was going to turn right around and do Fallujah,
Yeah.
and that was a real kind of fork in the road for me, right? I didn't have, from my perspective, I was kind of getting conflicting word, right? I had career staff NCOs saying, "Hey, take your orders, don't quote unquote chase something that's not
Right.
guaranteed,"
Right.
because who wasn't itching to go back, right? Most people were, and it was a quick turnaround if I remember right.
Yeah. It was like 7
But
months.
I
I
ended
think they were back in country. Yeah.
so pretty short.
Yeah.
And so I made the choice to take the orders to Quantico, which ended up being one of the pinnacle or high water marks of my time in the Marine Corps, and teaching there for the better part of 3 or 4 years. And it was a fantastic spot for not only personal growth as an individual operator and as a sniper, but a lot of exposure to kind of opening up my aperture as far as what's possible, in the federal government outside of
Right.
the big green machine,
Right.
as we
Right.
call it.
Right.
So I attribute my time there to, it was a good choice.
Yeah.
As much as I would like to have been with the guys in Fallujah, you make your choices and you live with it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And then from there, you did a lot of different things, contracting, a lot of instructing, teaching at a very high level. And through all of that, I mean, you can call out any highlights of that time. Certainly is a long time, but through that time, you're married, you've got kids, you're doing something that most people don't do while also maintaining a family and a personal life. And you did. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think so often we talk about the pitfalls and the dangers, and it's very, very hard, very hard. But there is a way to navigate it, and it's not without its difficulties, it's not without its challenges, but it's possible. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Okay, and I can start off by saying I didn't do it well. And I think that's an important message to the listeners or the guys out there that are going through it right now. um Man, if I could do it over again,
Sure,
right?
sure.
I fell into the pitfall that's common, that everything else kind of got put on the back
Right.
burner. And I have, shout out to my wife. Jen and I have been married. She's also a Marine of 14 years. We've been married for going on 25, I think. Yeah, 25. We just celebrated our 25th
Awesome.
anniversary.
Awesome.
And thank you. uh, all the kudos go to her, because I was putting almost no effort into it. Everything I was trying to achieve, very selfish, very self centered. And because you're kind of, the mindset in those environments is, it comes first, mission, job, and that's a necessity. But there is a way to find balance and do it well. I almost think, me personally, obviously, I had to do it the wrong way so I could figure out how to do it the right way, and have spent the last, I would say, 5 or 6 years, trying to do it the right way, because I did it the wrong way for so long. Um, you have two families,
Yeah.
right? And you spend more time with your Marine Corps family, your team, whether it's, when I was overseas contracting, it was 3 months on, 1 month off. And so it's easy to see how, even that 30-day time period for the better course of 4 or 5 years, a lot of balls get dropped.
Right.
I made a ton of mistakes, and, it just, it takes a recentering and a refocusing to realize, what's the, your priorities,
Yep.
right? And once you figure out what those priorities are, which is, family,
Yeah.
loved ones, friends, you just got to re-zero yourself and kind of reprioritize those targets,
That's
those
good.
priorities.
So the moral of the story is marry well and you'll be okay. Is that
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
the
yeah. Find the right one,
yeah,
right? I lucked out. I struck gold right off the bat. Yeah, she's fantastic, and having her be dual service
yeah, it helps.
obviously aided a lot. I think had we not been dual service, we might be having a different conversation.
Yeah.
But she's yeah, all the kudos kind of go to her. I made every mistake you could.
Yeah. I made a lot of mistakes coming home too, and I wasn't in for a long time, but even just trying to figure out who am I on the other side of this. And it's so clear when you're doing the work that you know how to do in the military, right? It makes sense. And then you come home, you're trying to figure things out. But one of the things I've said often is your family gets it if you have to be away. They understand that comes with the territory. What they don't get is when you're home and you're away, right?
Correct.
If you're home, be home, because you can operate at a high level when you're away, but you need to operate at that same high level when you're home. And that's a hard balance to strike. You just have a hard time turning it off, and uh, somehow going to, soccer games and school stuff and whatever. It just doesn't seem that important because of what you've been doing, but it's super important to your family.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, it's very, very difficult. And that's why conversations like these are so important, because I think the more that guys and gals hear it, that have either are our age and have experienced it and are still trying to find that balance and find that correct calibration, but more importantly, the people that the younger generation that are inevitably going to go through the same things, unfortunately. It's but the balance is paramount, because if you hit that skinny pedal on the right, like I feel like I did for as long as I did, eventually you're going to run out of gas or hit a brick wall, right? It's inevitable, So let's learn how to throttle back a
Yeah,
little bit, and apply proper pressure when needed in the appropriate places.
that's good. The one of the things that helps, service members or transitioning service members, wherever you find yourself on that kind of continuum, is having the right people around, having people that get you, that understand, and knowing a little bit of your family story. I know you have a brother, right? That was a Marine.
Yeah, brother and sister, both Marines.
Okay, and a wife who is as well and understands that. How important has it been to you to have an extended family that gets it? Like, you can just say stupid stuff and talk about what you're dealing with, whether you do or not. I don't know if you do with them, but just to have people around you that you can be yourself and not have to, pretend that things are okay all the time.
Oh, sure. It's a yeah, with the extended family, with the my dad, all the uncles, tons of predominantly Marines. It's a constant conversation, and my brother and sister both did 2 tours after you and I, our time frame, and my wife, her brother, we had a KIA in the family, unfortunately.
Wow.
And he was a Marine in Afghanistan. So yeah, it's a common conversation. It's we have that kind of baked in support structure to where at any given time and place, you've got somebody that you can talk it out if you need to, right? And our family, we do a good job of having kind of a positive reflection,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
focusing on the positive. Like, I look at our time, and I think my family shares it. Like, yes, there were obviously some bad times, but the experience was one of growth,
Mm,
right? The experience was one that I look back with in a positive way. I'm thankful for the time that I spent, right? And I'm thankful for the bad times too,
yeah.
because you can't appreciate the good
Yeah.
times without kind of the suffering, right? And so it's paramount, right? It's paramount to have that, and being surrounded, we a very tight knit family. It's been very beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for, a lot of people like you and me, or people who've served for a long time, particularly, they leave that environment and they don't have anyone. And you just get tired of trying to explain yourself to people. And there's a certain sense of shame that comes with how you feel. There shouldn't be, but there is. And how do I articulate to that to people around me? If you don't have the right community around you, then man, you can't transition from one thing to the next. You hit a wall and you just kind of get stuck there. And, one thing watching kind of your trajectory is that you've been able to move from one thing to the next and kind of transition through these different things to now leading a company. And that doesn't happen alone. You have to have the right people in your life to help you get there.
Yeah, it's not taking no for an answer, and basically, I try and tell guys, right, like it's you want to get hit in the mouth on a daily basis, step outside of your comfort zone and try something new, right? So if anything, it's going to teach you resilience. But what I think, and I was having extensive conversations with a teammate last night about this, is you have these individuals that have been put through kind of the test of all tests, right? They've been through and been successful, not without failure, but the majority of people have been successful. They wouldn't be Marines. They wouldn't be where they are today. There is zero reason why you're not going to be successful in anything that you apply yourself. And to just keep that on the forefront of your kind of brain housing group, like it's not you're going to be without failure. It's that if you don't stop, you will be successful. You just have to keep pushing.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, don't take no for an answer. That's great. Talk about, I was trying to figure out a transition here. Talk about Nomadic Research. And then I'd love to hear you just talk about that, how you got into that and why that's important to you. But then through that, you've continued to serve and watching some of your videos and listening to your podcast, your company exists obviously for the reason every company exists, to make money and to, provide for your families and do those things. But you guys are both committed. You're committed as a team to like, this is a thing we hold loosely and we're going to support the communities that we came from.
Without a doubt, yeah. The kind of the impetus of Nomadic Research was my teammate and I, Matt Horton, sitting around the campfire, if you will, in Afghanistan. In the contracting space, there's always your exit strategy or kind of your plan B and C, right? Because it's such a fickle and unstable environment. When I showed up to the team room after selection in Afghanistan, it was like, welcome to the team room. Hey, by the way, start looking for another job. And in my brain, I was like, whoa, this was supposed to be kind of my forever. I was going to ride this into the sunset and ended up, doing it for 14 years, but always, from day one, kind of working on a plan B and C. What's chapter 3? What's chapter 4 going to look like?
Right.
And Matt, my business partner, who's a former Navy SEAL, hit me up and said, hey, I've got this idea for this company, outdoor adventure apparel and travel accessories for, people that live on the road, basically, have that kind of nomadic lifestyle. And I said, what do you need from me? He said, just your loyalty. I was like, I'm in.
I can do that.
Yeah, I can do that. That sounds cheap, So yeah, we established the company and always trying to, reach back and aid the communities from which we came in any way, shape, or form. I definitely try and do that with the podcast, educational, informative, and entertaining. And just once again, kind of be that voice of positivity. Like we spent so long being a destructive force, which was necessary at the time, and being a willing participant. But I can be just as effective on the positive side. Right. And so from that day forth, it was like, hey, we're just going to try and be a force of positivity. Not try and set the example. You know what I'm saying? I by no means wrote the book on do it like me. In fact, it's more like, hey, check out all the ways I've messed up and learned from it. But spread a positive message in a community that unfortunately there's a lot of heavy weight, right? There's a lot of we've all been through quite a bit, but it can be positive, right? And so we attempt to be as positive as possible.
How important is service to the person who has served? They've experienced some things in their life and now they're at kind of that transition moment. How important is looking outside and serving others to making that transition work and helping you as an individual move forward. It's not always all about the people you're helping, right? There is a residual impact.
I think it's paramount to find that new purpose. I think you have to have a high degree of selflessness to enlist in the first place, right? Whether it's we're trying to serve the country, we're trying to serve our families, and so finding that new purpose or that new way to be selfless, right? And the only if the only way I can be, if the only way I can be selfless is to be very, very candid about the mistakes I've made and how, basically the things that I've done wrong, and offer that as a guidebook or a rule book to avoid those pitfalls. Then that's kind of my new purpose, right? And kind of warts and all, right? It's paramount to find that new sense of duty, and I think worth in your everyday activities, right? Helping people is rewarding, and I kind of close out almost every conversation. Hey man, hit me up if I can help. I will. And then try and kind of live by that. It's the least I can do, and so that's a very long-winded way of saying I think it's very important to find purpose in helping others.
That's good. A lot of men and women, I always say guys, but a lot of men and women who've served, they get real caught up in how they feel during the transition or how they feel reflecting on what happened in the military or whatever. And that's all real. It's all valid, but they become so introspective and so kind of internally focused that it crushes them. And it seems like just the ability to lift your eyes up, look outside of your situation, as bad as it may be. You don't have to have it all figured out, but find someone else that you can help and find someone else that you can serve. It just changes everything. It changes even the conversation that's happening in your heart and in your head, because you realize, like, oh, I do still, like you said, have a purpose. I can still accomplish something important here.
It's terrifying, right? It's absolutely terrifying. The thought of leaving that environment, right? Whether it's been 4 years or 24 years, the thought of leaving that environment is crippling. The fear is crippling, and I'm not ashamed to say that. It's a fear unto itself. It's not like getting shot at or being in an active combat zone. It's the fear of the unknown, and what am I going to do with myself? And come to find out, that same fear that I had leaving the Marine Corps and going into the contracting realm, I figured it out, right? And going back to that 9 times out of 10, you're successful individuals. You have the tools, how to be successful. And oh, by the way, 14 years later, when I decided to leave the organization, same fear.
Right.
Same fear all over again. Like, what am I going to do with myself? Right. And then you figure it out, right? Whether it's through faith or through family or through your network or your resilience or all of the above, right? We figure it out. You know what I'm saying? There's going to be hiccups here and there, but if you keep your head up and stay positive, you're going to be successful. You've been successful up to this point. What would change?
That speaks a little bit to that issue of where do you find your identity, and if you find your identity in the uniform or in the job, then when that changes, because it will change, you don't know who you are anymore. But if it's that I've always been capable, I've worked hard, I know I can do that, that's who I am, then it doesn't matter where you find yourself. You're going to be able to transition from whatever thing you were doing to something new, because you're not a different person. That's just a job that you did, and now you're in a new job.
Yeah, 100%. And I tell this story all the time. Anytime I get the chance, I was going through some treatment, and my counselor asked me a question. He said, during one of our counseling sessions over the phone, he said, "Hey, if you were to die tomorrow, what would it say on your tombstone?"
Yeah.
And it set me back. Set me back in my chair, and I was like, I've never thought of that, And he goes, "Well, what would it say?" And he kind of listed off the accolades, sniper, recon, all the kind of t-shirts, right? All the things that we kind of hang, Marine Corps, hang our hat on. And I was like, yeah, I would say all those things. And he goes, okay, well, what else could it say? Like, you're not even halfway done yet. those are what's, to your point, those are things that you did. Those were jobs that you performed at, but they're not who you are.
That's good.
Right. It's they're not your identity. It's something that you did. Right. And anymore, and I've chewed on that. This was years ago. I've chewed on that ever since. And, what would I want it to say now?
Right.
And I think it would say husband, father, friend, the end. It doesn't need to say anything else.
That's good. Yeah.
So once again, recalibrating to those things that matter, right? It's that sense of identity. That's a hard jacket to take off. It's armor. We spend so much time kind of creating this avatar, that's impervious and that's mission driven and so on and so forth. But there's going to be a chapter 2. There's going to be a chapter 3, and it's completely up to you how those chapters read. You have the tools.
That's good. That's so good, man. And that's when I talk about legacy and teach on it and speak on it, I use exactly those words. Really, you may be in a chapter you don't like, and that's fine. But as long as you're breathing, the story's still being written. So let's turn the page and start over. And when you start thinking about your life in those terms, what would it say on my tombstone? That's a legacy question. What will I leave behind? Because we're all going to leave something behind. So what am I going to leave behind? Well, is it something that people can look at and say that was neat? But then at home, it's like, my dad did that stuff. I heard about it, but he didn't show up for my thing. And he never really demonstrated that he cared about me or whatever. Or he was around, but he was, aloof or emotionally disconnected or whatever. When you start thinking about your legacy, it really does. It clarifies a lot of things. It's like a microscope is put on your life and you go, okay, well, that matters. That doesn't matter. That's important. That's not important. And as cool as our jobs may have been, at the end of the day, they need to serve a purpose. And hopefully they serve a big purpose. I mean, we could go, completely sideways on this. I don't even understand always when I think back on things I was a part of in the military, how important that was. Like in terms of like globally and nationally and those kind of things, right? You struggle with that. But I think personally, I learned so much. I grew so much. I've developed, relationships, but at the end of the day, it was a way to take care of my family. It was a way to chart a course and provide a vision to my kids of what they could do in their lives. And so, yeah, asking that legacy question, what's going to be left when you're gone? It clarifies so many things.
Sure. And when you're able to turn the noise down, so to speak, and kind of realize that there are so few things when it really boils down to it that actually matter. Obviously the relationship that you have with your family, with your close friends, people in general. I used to, kind of have this thought process where I was trying to project, fear, intimidation. You know what I'm saying? Not to be trifled with, so to speak. And it's all the things that come with that ego that we build up, and then you realize maybe I should focus on my interactions with individuals being positive.
Yeah.
Right. When I break contact with this individual, was I a good part of their day or a bad part of their day? Right. And, so once again, it's, the legacy that you leave behind, try and set as positive and as good of an example as you can in every way that you can, right? Knowing that people are inherently flawed. I have my fair share and then some, right? But being kind, being compassionate, the teeth can come out, right? When the teeth need to come out. And I think that's a hard thing for guys and gals when they transition, the teeth are never going to go away, but there's a time and place.
That's right.
It doesn't have to be all the time, right? We're just not in that environment anymore. And that's a tough transition. Again, that's just part of that reintegration back into, civilian society, period, end of story. And once again, conversations like this, I think help.
I remember you mentioned Fallujah. So we came back from Iraq and I transitioned out. I mean, within 30 days, I was off active duty and, all that stuff then happened. So when we came home, people don't really maybe remember this, but when we came home, it was like mission accomplished, right? The war's over. It's all done. And so that was kind of the mindset a lot of us had coming back as we went, we did the thing, and now it's over. And so let's move on. Well, it didn't take very long before clearly that wasn't true. And we ended up in 20 years of war. But I transitioned out of the Marine Corps and I was working a job that was a wonderful job. And then those guys went back to Fallujah. And I remember just being absolutely crushed with a couple of things. One was I promised them, I told them that I would be there for them, I would take care of them, and I'm not. I started to hear about, KIAs and guys who were wounded. My platoon sergeant when I was in Iraq, Gunny Keister, was deployed back to Fallujah, and he would email me like every week. He'd give me like an update because I knew a bunch of those guys, and he'd send me a message and he's like, "Hey, this is what's happening." And so, man, I remember hearing about that and thinking, first of all, I abandoned these guys. That was one thought I had, but the other one was just like this overwhelming. The big green machine rolls without me. Like when you're there, you feel like this doesn't happen if I'm not here, which is it's a stupid thought, right? Like, I mean, I always talk about our deployment to Iraq and all that. And I mean, there were 30,000 Marines that deployed to Iraq. So you're one very small cog, right? But you feel like this doesn't happen without me. And then when they went back to Fallujah, I just had this overwhelming, like, I don't even know how to describe it other than just like a period of mourning. Like they don't need me anymore. And that led to a long process for me of trying to figure out like, okay, well, who am I now? Like, what does any of it mean?
Yeah, 1,000%. I can relate to all of it. I had that epiphanical, and I shared all the same feelings. The guys were calling me, at Quantico, during high activities,
Right.
which I was kind of, should you be on the phone right now?
Right.
Come on, guys. Hey, wish you were here type of deal. And I had that same epiphanical moment. I think, and I'll speak for myself, like I loved the Marine Corps so much. It was my entire identity. It was my entire being. And I loved it so much. And I had this one epiphanical moment one day where there was a sergeant major retirement, and which is, on a Friday.
Yeah.
And, here's the flowers and the everything, right? And the whole ceremony. And on Monday, the following Monday, you've got a PFC that's checking into that particular unit.
Yep.
Has no idea that dude ever existed.
Right.
And it just hit me like a bolt of lightning, like this machine is never going to love me the way I love it.
Right.
And so that kind of opened up the bandwidth, so to speak, for me to start kind of looking at, okay, what other avenues or what other things, what other capabilities or opportunities, because there's going to be life after this, right? And for a time, you can't conceptualize it. You cannot conceptualize not right, whether you're in for 4 years or 24. It's your reality, and nothing else outside is real. And it's tough. It's a tough transition. It's a tough mental shift in gears to be like, okay, I'm going to have to start making some moves and making some plans here. And that inevitably goes back to self-improvement. Yeah. Okay, I need to go to college. Right. I need to go, you know what I'm saying? Like I need to start preparing myself, right? It's mission planning. It's, life is MET-T, right? You know what I'm saying? Like you can literally apply the mission planning process to anything. And so that's kind of what I started doing all through my time in Quantico, throughout my time in Recon. Was always kind of having that, you've got your 3 and 5 meter targets, but what's 2 and 3 years down the road going to look like? And let's start laying the groundwork to make sure that those are successful times.
Yeah, that's good. Man, that's really good. It's interesting to watch. So the military transition, 100%, everything that you just said. Another community that really struggles with this is the law enforcement community, and I know you've worked with law enforcement as well. And it's very much the same. It's like I'm the protector, the defender, the whatever here in this community, and then it ends, and those guys look around and go, what happens next? Without having prepared for eventually this comes to an end. Who are you when this is over?
And I think another thing that my counselor said to me that was once again kind of hit me hard in the 10 ring was, no one's ever going to take any of that away from you.
That's right. Yeah,
They
yeah,
can't.
yeah. Right.
It's you can't, like you served, and that new purpose or that new time should now be directed towards yourself,
Mm,
right? And your family and your loved ones who inevitably have sacrificed along the way. You know, it is okay. It's counterintuitive for people like us. It is okay to be selfish
mm.
at times, right? When you've spent your entire life and existence being selfless,
Right.
and using that time in that chapter 2 or 3 or whatever it is, you'll always be, you might not be an active cop, but no one's ever going to take away that 10, 20, 15 years, however long you did it for. Period. End of story. It's yours to hold on to forever.
Good.
But the chapter 2, what's next?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You just crush that. And that's a difficult thing to crush. Being a police officer is not easy, right? If you were strong enough, resilient enough, and successful enough to crush that, what else can you go out and just and crush?
Yeah.
Right.
That's good. Yeah. You should always be proud of your service. And again, I say this all the time. I'm very, very thankful for what I had the privilege of being a part of. And that's how I view it now, right? Is I had just this incredible blessing of being a part of something really big and meaningful, but I just can't find my whole world in that. And so, yeah, if you spend a long time in the military, you spend a long time in law enforcement, whatever it is, you need to prepare for the next phase or the next stage. I mentioned my son's in law enforcement, and so I'm spending time having these conversations, not just with him, but with other young police officers, right? And they're just, I appreciate it because I see in them like how I felt when I was 24 years old, right? Like get after it all the time, and that's amazing. But trust me, someday you're going to be looking at the back of this thing and going, what do I do now? So start preparing for that now. Don't get so wrapped up in what you're doing. It's important, but it's not the end of the world. And that organization is going to go on without you too, whether you believe it or not. So it's important to know.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. And I think there's that, once again, there's that transitional, it's very, very heartbreaking. It's very, very heavy when you come to that realization. But through positive actions, healthy habits, whether, like I said, whether it's faith or hobbies or your support network and your friends, if you're hanging out with the right people, kind of showing you that, once again, that chapter 2 and chapter 3 is literally whatever it is that you want it to be. I honestly believe that. You know what I'm saying? And if that's sitting back in the rocking chair, for the rest of your days, then you earned it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But if you're happy and you're content, then we're not having this conversation, right? It's that, how do I fill that hole? How do I find that new, cloak to wear, so to speak, that new identity? And that's it's just something that you have to go through, right? And not get, stuck in that negative loop of yesterday. Tomorrow is looking pretty bright if you want to have that perspective.
Yeah, you have that opportunity in front of you. And I've talked about this a lot, particularly on this podcast and other places, but this is why faith is so important to me and so important in this process, because I don't mean like just have faith in whatever you want, because I had faith in the Marine Corps, right? I had faith in other things, but having faith in a God who creates you means whatever else happens in my life, there is that which does not change, that which does not move. And that allows me to then go, okay, how was I created? What was I created to accomplish? And I can do that anywhere. And it's a new environment, but I know who I am, and it has nothing to do with an organization or even a job that I love.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. Yes.
So Memorial Day is coming up as we record. It's a few weeks away, but the month of May, and this is a really important time, I think, for those who have served. And I know that you think of specific people when Memorial Day rolls around, I would imagine. I know I do. I talk about a couple of people, and these were people during my time. I always talk about Shane Childers, first KIA of the war in Iraq. We were there when that happened. Tejeda, Staff Sergeant Tejeda, man, I was thinking about him the other day. It kind of happened later during our time there when we finally got into Baghdad, but what a man, what an incredible Marine. What an interesting human being, right? Interesting person. But I think of him as well. And then the other day I was talking about Gunny Bohr, and man, a guy who was like the consummate professional, right? And was killed in Baghdad. I mean, doing what Marines do. And I think about these guys and so many other people, so many other people. That was the beginning of this thing, but so many other folks. And Memorial Day is really important. This season is really important, not just so that we can pause and remember, think about, honor people that we cared about, but I think it's important for those of us who have served to help those who haven't served understand the cost of, this thing we call freedom. Can you talk about not just Memorial Day as in the holiday, but talk about the season and the importance of it to you, and maybe some of those folks that have made an impact on your life?
Definitely, yeah, it's definitely a family event, obviously, and what we do. Polo, Illinois is the town that my wife and I grew up in, and it's kind of a tradition. There's obviously the military parade. All the veterans show up, and we march out to the cemetery, do the ceremony there, and then there's a large family gathering that goes to the gravesite of Justice Bartelt, who was killed in action. My wife's maiden name is Bartelt, and it's we treat it as a celebration.
Yeah.
There is that sense of mourning, right? What you're mourning the loss. You miss that individual, you miss their presence, right? But we celebrate. We celebrate in the sense of really trying to keep in the forefront of our minds that individual and those individuals are at peace, right? Where they're at is eternal bliss, happiness, contentment, and they would not want us to kick rocks, kind of treat it in a negative light. And so we celebrate the time that we had with those individuals, and we honor the sacrifices that they made. And especially in my family, we kind of count our blessings that with the amount of us that spent time in the GWAT that relatively unscathed. You know what I'm saying? It obviously could have been a lot, Vegas odds, it probably should have been a lot worse.
Sure.
So we try and celebrate it. It's a heavy but joyous occasion. And we just, once again, think back to the positive aspects and what those individuals did. The fearlessness, the bravery, and ultimately, obviously, the sacrifice, and I think that's something to be held up high on a pedestal and not mourned.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I think that's right. It's that question of if they could come back and tell us how they wanted us to behave, right? They'd probably say, celebrate. Like, I gave my life for this. I gave my life for the opportunity you had to do that. We kind of look down on people who get together and have family barbecues and stuff on Memorial Day. It's like, I think that's probably what they would have been doing, first of all. And second, what they would want us to do. Do you think we have a responsibility as veterans to, I don't know if the word educate is right, but to educate people who haven't served about why this is important?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And not in the sense of, see if I can articulate this correctly, not in the sense of, hey, I deserve a pat on the back. Right. That's the farthest thing from it. And that goes back to, I think, the best answer I've ever heard, because that quintessential, hey, thank you for your service, and how do you respond to that?
Yeah, right.
And one of the best answers I've ever heard was, and somebody did it to me. I was like, hey, thank you for your service, I appreciate it. And he goes, you were worth it. And it kind of set me back. I'm like, and so I do think it's important to educate, just, and not in the sense of, hey, you should be paying attention to this, or this is the correct course of action. It's people that have raised their hands for whatever reason they raised it, it's irrelevant. They raised it. And if they're not here and they made that ultimate sacrifice, the least we can do is recognize that, if just for a second. Just for a second, and so, yeah, it's and it's a delicate subject, right? It's an uncomfortable topic. They're uncomfortable with the fact that maybe they didn't serve or whatever, and that's okay, right? I don't think anyone should ever feel guilt of not serving. Um, but the way, if you do feel that in any way, shape, or form, it's an easy fix. Memorial Day is in that celebration and that kind of, you know, recognition of that day is the least anyone can do, right? To kind of show that respect and that thankfulness.
Yeah, that's good. It's amazing how many people will come up to you and say, "Oh, you served. That's awesome. I was going to, but," right? It's like, and that behind that is like almost a sense of like guilt, like I didn't do that or whatever. The number of people that were going to be Marines is crazy because I know a lot of Marines, and it's a pretty low bar. I mean, let's be honest. You could have done it probably if you wanted to. It's not like it's that hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel the same way. Believe it or not, like when I'm in the presence of firefighters or police officers,
Yeah.
I'm like, hey man, that's something I always kind of toyed around with doing.
Yeah.
I'm so thankful that there are people like you that are doing it because I came to the realization that I could not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like, a big dose of humility, right? It's not a high bar. It's just potentially high consequences.
Right, there are high consequences for sure.
Yeah.
My youngest wants to be a Navy corpsman, which I always joke that every family has a black sheep, right? And he wants to be a Navy corpsman. So we were actually talking about the ASVAB yesterday, and I'm like, yeah, it's again not a high bar, right? Like just you'll be fine. But my point with that is people don't need to apologize for not serving for whatever reason they didn't, whatever. I mean, it doesn't. That was their reason. It's fine. But live your life in such a way that you respect those who did. And I think for me, that's kind of what it boils down to is, look, you did your thing, whatever your thing was, contribute to the world that hopefully we had a hand in building.
Yeah, exactly. Something, and I told my oldest daughter this as she was, getting close to the graduation age, and obviously being surrounded by it. I'm sure she felt a lot of pressure, even though there was zero pressure on her mom and I's side. I said, hey, you don't have to serve, but you do have to contribute something positive to society.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You can't just take. I don't care if you volunteer at the soup kitchen. I don't care if you pick up trash on the side of the highway. I don't care. But you're going to give back somehow, some way, because none of this is free.
Yeah. That's good.
Just period, end of story.
That's good. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's about service, not necessarily which uniform you wore in service or how you did it. And again, I'm a firm believer that all of us are created with different skills and opportunities and perspectives and backgrounds. And so use that, steward over that, and find a place to use that. And there are a lot of ways to do that. Yeah, that's good. If you were sitting across from someone who, let's say they're mid-career, maybe they have a family, maybe they don't, they're far enough along that they're pretty settled. They know how to do the job they're doing and they're proud of it or whatever, but maybe they're also far enough along. They're starting to look down to someday I'm going to have to transition out of this thing. You've kind of seen this from every place, I think, from wearing the uniform to doing the job, but not necessarily wearing the uniform, training high performers. I know you worked with the FBI's hostage rescue team for a while, and those guys, you talk about high performers. I had the privilege of going to their compound and meeting with some of those guys and watching them train. Unbelievable. I mean, it's just
great dudes.
Like anyone, this is a complete aside, but anyone that says there aren't levels of human, we're all the same, they haven't been in that environment. Those are not normal people, right? And you've been around a lot of that level of people. So you've seen this in all kind of everywhere, right? From like the PFC who just had nowhere else to go, so he went in the military, to a guy who probably could have done anything that he wanted to. Special operations community has guys who are super high IQ, could have been professional athletes, but they chose to carry a gun instead, right? So you've seen this from every perspective. You're sitting down with a guy and you've got to give him some advice. What would your advice be to him?
That's a great question.
It's a big question. I know it's a big question. It's a very individual question too, but just generally, like, bro, you've got to understand this thing.
I think what you have to, I think what I would tell them is, once again, and not to sound like a broken record, whatever it is that you're doing, if it doesn't fulfill you, right? If it doesn't fulfill you, if it doesn't give you purpose and joy and contentment, then it's time to start looking for something that does. Right? If you're completely, if your general disposition is of contentment, joy, and happiness, then you're obviously right where you need to be, and you need to continue to march.
Yeah.
Right? If there's, and I'll use myself as an example, like I was at the 12-year mark in the Marine Corps, which by any argument is over the hump, and kind of closer to the end than it is anything else. But I was in such a bad place mentally, physically, spiritually, that I was not operating at 100%. So therefore, I'm doing myself and the Marines around me zero favors by kind of sticking around and gutting it out. Right. And I found that contentment, that joy, and that purpose in kind of the next adventure. And whatever that was, just simply the act of cutting the ties and kind of fresh start, and let's just see what happens. And I found my purpose, my joy, and my contentment going down that path. And 14 years later, the well had run dry, and then I had to find purpose, joy, and contentment in something else. Right. Kind of that new pursuit. And that new pursuit, once again, was trying to be a voice and an example of positivity, of resilience, of hey, it's you're going to this is just a new selection. Like, how many selections have you been through, right? This is just a new selection process. And guess what? If you fail, you can go again.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just keep going, just keep going. Don't take no for an answer. Bet on yourself, and positive habits, positive and healthy habits obviously help. And seeking that new path that brings you joy and contentment.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. Some people just grind it out because this is where I am, right? Well, I'm here. Yeah, I'm at the 12-year mark. It's for those who haven't been in the military, that is the mark where these conversations often happen. Is like, okay, 3 enlistments. I'm basically 8 years away from retirement. So even if I hate my job and I'm going to go become a recruiter somewhere, it's 8 years. Dude, it's 8 years. There's a lot that can happen in 8 years, and you have a family to take care of and a future to plan for. And so sometimes it's wise to stick it out, but often it's the best thing you can do to say, I'm going to go find the next thing. And that's right.
Yeah. Be brutally self-aware. Have those hard, internal conversations with yourself. Like, and I did. And, and obviously seeking advice from anybody and everybody that would give it to me.
Yeah, of course.
And, the ultimate conversation was with my wife, where I was like, hey, we can either do the next 9 years, 8 or 9 years on their terms, and we kind of know how that's going to go. We know how I'm going to handle it, which is going to be not well, because I went from moderately belligerent to off the charts, belligerent by that time. And, or we can take a chance on ourselves and kind of see what this new path, where this new path will lead. And ultimately, it was just better for my interest, for her interest, the family's interest, that I not be in that constant state of discontentment, because it breeds so much other negative emotions. Yeah. And so, yeah, we cut ties, and like I said, it's been good.
Yeah.
That's
good. Man, it's good to talk to you. I feel like we could sit here and talk for a lot longer than this. We need to make it not 23 years between this time and the next time. We've communicated a little bit. We've talked a little bit, but I need to make my way to Illinois and We can hang
Please.
out. Yeah, be awesome.
Anytime. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
How can people follow you? Obviously, the socials. Where can they learn more about Nomadic Research and the work you guys are doing there?
Yeah, so nomadicresearch.com is where the retail shop is at. We also have the Nomadic Research podcast, YouTube, Spotify, and and then I'm true name Dagan Van Oosten on all the socials. So yeah, please check us out. We got a lot of good gear, and you won't be disappointed. And I really appreciate the opportunity, brother.
Yeah, thank you, man. Dagan Van Oosten. Appreciate you.